that? I don't know why I still do that. It's a really good question. Alright, y'all. I'm back. 4 weeks off. Wow. That really flew by quickly. Also, I think I got a lot accomplished. The waltz is getting on its feet, so if anybody knows any good entertainment lawyers, please let me know. And yesterday I sprained my right ankle right before an interview. So, didn't think that I was going to do this little pre-recorded part. There was a lot that was supposed to happen today. Like, I was supposed to do a photo shoot with Rena. We were going to record some interview episodes. And Rena and I have been planning for months to get something done. And yet, here we are. I look like absolute crap. But before I get into any of that, though, I need to make a plea with y'all. So my cousin Denise has a son in high school. Denise and I spent summers together growing up in Blakely, Georgia, South Georgia, and her mom helped raise my brothers and I when we were in Georgia. Over the weekend, we all found out about her son Tyler. Per his GoFundMe page, Tyler Wins is a junior at Early County High School. His parents are Denise Sparrow and Tremaine Wins. He's currently hospitalized in Atlanta at Scottish Rite Children's Hospital, where he is beginning to prepare treatments to beat bone cancer. Tyler plays varsity football and basketball for the Bobcats and is a Reach Scholar. Reach Scholars commit to maintaining good behavior, attendance, and core curriculum GPAs throughout middle and high school, and Tyler excels at all of these. Tyler is a great young man who is loved by his teammates and coaches, classmates, and community. The expenses for his medical care, travel, and lodging will quickly add up for his parents. As his school family, they are asking if you are able and feel led to do so, please donate to help his family. Every dollar will help and no amount is too small. Most importantly, we're all asking for you to pray for our family, their friend, their teammate. In their words, cancer has picked the wrong one. Tyler is tough and we can't wait to watch him win his fight against cancer. That was from the GoFundMe page. As for me, I just saw him at Thanksgiving. It's just, there really aren't words. If no amount is too small, please donate to his GoFundMe campaign. I know that my cousin is doing her best to keep it together and keep her spirits up for Tyler as he goes through this. He's only 16. So if you have a moment, please help out my family. This has been a hard year, on top of my grandmother already undergoing her own cancer treatment. I love you, Nini. I love you, Bubba. And I'm sending you all my love and help as best as I can. So with that, let's get started, shall we? First, your top 3 things. Look, it's just going downhill from here. If you have been under a rock, last week there was a coup. I'm gonna say a motherfucking coup. Look. Ooh. Per the AP News, Capitol assault a more sinister attack than first appeared. Under battle flags bearing the 45th president's name, the Capitol's attackers pinned a bloodied police officer in a doorway, his twisted face and screams captured on video. They mortally wounded another officer with a blunt weapon and body slammed a third over a railing into the crowd. Pelosi says House will impeach Trump, pushes VP to oust him. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House will proceed with legislation to impeach the 45th president, as she pushes the vice president and the cabinet to invoke the constitutional authority to force him out, warning that the 45th president is a Trump to democracy after the deadly assault on the Capitol. The House action could start as soon as Monday as pressure increases on the 45th president to step aside. A Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania joined Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska in calling for Trump to resign and go away as soon as possible. Last Wednesday, Capitol Police were overrun with little defense against rioters. Despite ample warnings about pro-45th president demonstrations in Washington, U.S. Capitol Police did not bolster staffing on Wednesday and made no preparations for the possibility that the planned protest could escalate into massive violent riots, according to several people briefed on law enforcement response. The revelation shed new light on why Capitol Police were so quickly overrun by rioters. The department had the same number of officers in place as on a routine day. While some of those officers were outfitted with equipment for a protest, they were not staffed or equipped for a riot. In the highest of honors to Eugene Goodman, who stopped the mob from entering the Senate chambers. what I've also learned, and verify this as well, verify everything. What I've also learned is that both the Capitol Police and the DC Police were hampered. The DC Police cannot send police onto federal grounds without federal authority, nor can. There's a lot to examine from the situation. So, with all that said, yesterday I sprained my ankle right before an interview, and I was recording an interview with my dear friend Daniel Del Nero. We are college friends. We both grew up in Gwinnett County, and then we met through a mutual friend. He was roommates with Rob, and he roomed with Rob, and we've, as many of us have done, we've kept Facebook in touch. He's a lawyer, and he's a lawyer that he says in his intro, but I forget now, Squire Squibbs. Man, I really suck at remembering stuff. But the interview is recorded yesterday on a range of topics. And now normally I air an intro interview first where I don't butcher names and names of companies. So you know who the guest is. After we finished our talk yesterday, we turned the cameras off and drank some more tea that was spiked with some cognac. And then the topic quickly turned to the attack on the Capitol and the issue of free speech. He is passionate about free speech. He is a lawyer, and he litigates, I know that much. He litigates for a living, and he's very passionate not only about LGBTQ rights, but also free speech. So, we turned the cameras back on and had a discussion on the issue of free speech and the assault on the Capitol and what that means. Again, before I close out this section of the show, I'm putting the links for my cousin's GoFundMe. Please visit, please donate, please do what you can. At the very least, please just spread the word. Every little bit helps. And we're all trying to keep it together for Tyler. One of the benefits of having the studio is just like, well, you can record anything you want to anytime. Alright, we are back for a special episode talking about, so we were just having an after the show chat, and then we're like, let's keep continuing this conversation because we were starting to talk about, in the current news, of social media banning Trump, and Daniel was bringing up some very good points, and you continue with those points because you can explain them better than I can.
Sure, so I'm going to be on a bit of a soapbox here.
Okay, please. I love soapboxes.
This is an issue that we were speaking earlier, whether law is a passion or just a job. One of the areas I'm actually passionate about is free speech. First Amendment, broader concepts of free speech, free expression. Being able to express who you are, being able to express views that are contrary to political or government supported views. And lately the controversy has been various primarily Republican legislatures. In the past it's been Democrats. Democrats, when they were in power and the Tea Party was rising, expressed similar views. And they're very dangerous. And that view is that Twitter, Facebook, others should not have the ability to kick President Trump off their platforms. Should not have the ability to put the warning labels for contains false information on their platforms. And they try and equivalent that to censorship. It's not. It's not. What they're really saying is that these government officials should be able to mandate a private company to carry views with which that company disagrees.
Yes.
That's really what they're doing.
And that's a conclusion I came to, like in my little thought piece that I was trying to work out yesterday, was ultimately you are controlling what a private company is saying by forcing them to carry these things.
Correct. And so the argument that's being propagated is this is what Nazis did, this is what fascism did. No. What Nazis and fascists actually did was required their preferred message to be carried. Here, the preferred message. Remember, Trump is the president. He's not some private citizen. He is the president. They're saying that Twitter, Facebook, etc. should be required to carry his messages.
That's is dangerous.
Right.
That's very dangerous.
And so think of the converse. Always think of the converse. So we're in Georgia, probably the most prominent liberal Georgian is Stacey Abrams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say Trump starts his own social media platform, which I think he probably will. Should he be required to carry Stacey Abrams' messages? No. No.
I agree. No.
Private citizen. It's once he's a private citizen.
Yes.
And you saw the same thing really in 2004 with Dixie Chicks and others who were expressing views contrary to the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Republicans were saying that speech should be silenced. They should be required to, when they're abroad, express pro-America views, which, in my view, anti-Iraq war was pro-American, but
right.
I digress.
That's a whole nother episode for us.
Right. But so the real censorship, the real First Amendment concern is whether government entities, elected politicians, can use their official power to mandate private companies to carry their preferred speech, and whether they can punish companies for failing to do so. Now, how are they? They're actually looking to punish these companies for not carrying their preferred message.
Interesting. And you said both the Democrats and Republicans, like back during the Tea Party uprising, they were trying to do this, and now similarly.
Correct. They were trying to get them to carry the false flags, etc. But let's stick with the current one because that's more on people's minds.
Right.
So legislation is being introduced by Representative Crenshaw and others that would treat online social media platforms. I probably shouldn't be using the name because we do represent some of them, but online social media platforms, saying that, well, they're really publishers, not platforms. And that's a big legal difference.
That's what I was reading yesterday.
Yeah. So the legal difference is publishers are liable for the content on their site. They have to exercise editorial control, and if false information is spread on their site, then they can be held legally liable for it. Well, that stifles content. It stifles debate because now they have to approve everything.
But what I was reading yesterday is it affords them the broadest protection under the First Amendment because they are exercising a viewpoint.
Well, platforms, if they're a platform, they can't be... Really, platforms have the broadest protection because they're not liable for content on their site. Anything can be published and they're not held liable. So they get to exercise discretion over what's on there and what's not without fear of legal liability. That's what allows them to exist. That's what allows for a free flowing of ideas. If they're considered a publisher, then that puts the onus on them to ensure accuracy, to ensure that it's not fighting words, to ensure like that they will be sued left and right, and the internet speech as we know it will cease to exist if that happens. And so now you have very short-sighted conservative lawmakers who want to consider them publishers rather than platforms because they banned Trump. That's retribution. That's retribution, and it's government punishing private companies for not carrying speech that a particular politician, a particular president prefers. It's very dangerous territory. Really, it doesn't matter what that speech is. That shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what the speech is, whether you agree with it or not. The ability of government to punish private companies for not carrying their preferred speech is very, very dangerous.
Very dangerous, and that goes against everything that I feel like free speech was fought for in this country.
Exactly, and we could get really nerdy about this and go back to the debate over the equal time laws. All right, so let's get nerdy.
Yeah, love it.
Traditionally, conservatives oppose what was known as an equal time restriction, meaning that for public broadcasters who blast their stuff out of the public airways had to give equal time to different viewpoints. So if you had Rush Limbaugh on, you had to for 30 minutes, you had to have Bill Maher on, just making up two polar opposite examples.
And they went away with that law in 98, didn't they?
They did. And they went away with it because conservatives correctly detested it because they viewed it as government-mandated viewpoint speech.
Okay.
So it was conservatives that were largely responsible for getting away with that. It's one thing that I absolutely agreed with them on.
Okay.
They were correct. I like the free flow of ideas, but I don't like government mandating the free flow of ideas. If you don't like Twitter, Facebook, Parler's restrictions, create your own.
Right. And that is the whole thing, is that like you are free to create your own, and they are treating these platforms as though it is public domain when it's not. It's akin to like the analogy I used was a mall. Like you can go into a mall, but they have discretion over who they allow in and out, and they can kick you out at any time.
Correct. The mall is not the public street corner.
Right.
And should be treated differently.
Right.
And so, once you kind of tear down that separation and say that government can mandate speech by private companies, private individuals. Remember, individuals and companies are treated the same for purposes of the First Amendment.
And that was Citizens United that did that, right?
It was.
Okay.
And, it's something else that I agree with. It's an area that I agree with conservatives. Private companies, private individuals should be able to carry viewpoint-based speech as they see fit.
And you know what? Starting a media company, I agree with that. Where it's just like, these things are my views, but not only that, it is a company's views that are separate, but whatever.
Right. So, you're a transgender black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Should you be required to have a white supremacist on? No.
Fuck no.
Right. And that's the equivalent. I mean, that is literally the equivalent. That's not a view that you should have to have expressed on your platform. And you do have a platform.
Right.
You should not be required to express that view. So I always like to think about it in speech issues. I always like to think about the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Would I want somebody who disagrees with my viewpoint to have control over what gets out there? And if the answer is no, then you're on shaky ground.
Yes. That's so funny you mentioned that, because that was the same thing that I was doing yesterday, my own thought experiment. I was like, I hold these beliefs, but if someone held the opposite, would I want similar things to be happening to them or whatever? Like exactly what you just said. Please continue.
Right. And so really that's all I had. I'll get off my soapbox now. That's why I had to say, Andy, it's completely contrary to the First Amendment. It's contrary to the notion of free speech. Private companies, private individuals should not be punished for refusing to repeat or carry speech with which they disagree. Mm-hmm. It just should not happen, period, end of story.
So I know that because I'm on Facebook and memes are the only way that I've kept saying all of this pandemic, but a lot of memes are popping up and they're using the gay bakery analogy, and mm-hmm. I feel like that's not quite the same. Like, I feel like that's a different territory, or is that the same? Or is that in the similar vein?
So to me, it's actually the same.
Okay.
If you own a bakery,
mm-hmm.
somebody from the Ku Klux Klan walks in and says they want a cake where the top piece, there's probably a name for it, I don't know what to call it, but they want the top piece to be a white guy in a Klan outfit hanging a transgender black woman. Mm-hmm. Should you be forced to make that cake?
Absolutely not.
Right.
And I agree across whatever of if a Christian bakery does not want to do a gay wedding cake, they should not be forced to do that. Like, you can't force someone to do something they don't want to do.
Right. And I think there are a few necessary exceptions to that. So okay. The most famous one is hotels.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Could hotels be forced to allow in black people? This was actually a case. It was Heart of Atlanta Motel. Mm-hmm. And the answer is, if it's a large hotel, they're so critical to the infrastructure of the country, yes, they should be forced to. Should a restaurant be able to be forced to allow black people to sit at the counter? In my view, yes. Because that's not really expressing a view. It's just prohibiting discrimination. Mm-hmm. Baking a cake is an art. To a cake master, that is an art. That is there. So, no, you shouldn't be forced to bake a cake that's going to have somebody hanging a transgender black woman.
Absolutely not.
A Christian should not be... I use the Christian term lightly because a lot of Christians would be very okay with gay marriage, with transgender rights. Probably the overwhelming majority are now. Right. But if somebody truly believes that it's a sin, even if they don't truly believe it, just they don't want to support it, they don't want anything to do it, they should not be forced to do it. I think it was a huge mistake for gay rights advocates to bring those cases.
I agree as well, and it's just anything that's forcing someone to do something that they don't believe in, there's different bakeries. Right.
And frankly, they sold out that bakery.
Right. There's something in seeking it out where it's not a genuine case, I feel like, and it's not like that was the only bakery in the entire country, and right. It's like, I need a cake and you're the only person that can bake this. It's like, you had options. Like, it's not like they didn't let you sit at the counter.
Would you want to go to a bake? Let's say you and Eddie are going to get a cake. Would you and Eddie want to get a cake that views you as living in sin.
That was the other thing that I did not agree with, too. It's just like, why do you want them to bake you a cake? Like,
Right.
you don't...
And the answer is they don't.
Right.
They don't.
And it's a control thing that just did not sit well with me.
Right. And
It's
so
forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do.
exactly. And that's why I always view speech expressing issues on would I want the other person who disagrees with me to be able to control my viewpoint, to force me to do something.
Yes.
If I'm a baker, which, I can't cook for shit, but let's say I could, I don't want to bake a cake with the Nazi flag.
Absolutely not.
I mean, I don't want to bake a cake with the rebel flag. But they legitimately believe that. That's their view. Should I be able to discriminate against them and say, fuck no, I'm not baking your fucking Nazi cake? Yes.
Yes. So the way that the law stands now is you would have to bake that cake, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yes. Well, it's a bit in flux.
Okay.
It's a bit in flux.
It's
I
being
think
challenged?
that's going to get over. Yeah, it's going to end up at the Supreme Court eventually, I think, and it's going to be you have a conservative but pro LGBTQ Supreme Court. That's not a dichotomy.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
As you saw in the gay rights cases this term, and they were 7-2. Mm-hmm. Overwhelming Trump's justices sided with LGBTQ. Like Gorsuch wrote the biggest opinion was whether I'm probably boring your audience at this point.
No,
but the biggest opinion was very controversial. Was whether I forget the statutory code, but it was whether it was Title 7 or Title 9, but whether sex discrimination prohibited discriminatory hiring practices based on sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. And Justice Gorsuch said, yes, it does. You look at the law; it says you cannot base hiring decisions based on based on sex.
Yeah.
So, if you're not hiring somebody, if you're not hiring a man because he sleeps with other men, but would hire a woman who sleeps with other men, you're discriminating based on their sex.
Right.
End of story. That was 7-2. And it was very controversial. Courts were split.
That was this year, right?
That was this year.
Because it's been, 2020. That was 2020.
2020.
And there was so much going on in 2020 that I feel like that was swept under the rug because...
There were good things that happened in 2020.
Right!
we forget that.
Like I remember celebrating for a day and then the next day it was like, new
I
trauma.
can't leave the house.
Right.
Yeah. But, so, that's an area where you really have to look at speech issues from what would I think with the other side being in control. And that's what these particular conservatives are not doing now. It's not all of them. Some get it. A lot get it.
I feel like, God damn, what is the term I'm trying to think for? Is that there are extremists on both sides, and I'm not an extremist. I feel like I'm a moderate. I am very much a moderate, and I have friends who are not extremists, but a lot more liberal than I am. But my parents are Republican, conservative. I was brought up conservative, and I view myself very middle of the road. But what that does lead me to is, so I remember there's a customer who comes in, and he's very much, I'm surprised he was not storming the Capitol, but I digress. But we got into a free speech discussion, and my problem with him is that he kept saying, I'm for free speech, but then he would impose these limits, and I would try and point out, like, there are limits that you're talking about, like threatening violence and all that, and I feel like a lot of the discussion around free speech is where are these limits and how do we draw them?
Drawing limits is the most difficult thing, the most controversial thing around free speech. Mm-hmm. Actually inciting violence is one of them. But really the more important one here is forced speech. This is really about forced speech. Mm-hmm. It's about forcing others to carry speech. So,
and I think that's the argument he was trying to make. He just didn't know how to make it. But I was trying to... I don't know.
And he was probably in favor of forced speech. Like, he was probably criticizing Twitter, Facebook, others for taking down Trump's tweets. Right. So, really, that's not free speech. That's government-compelled speech, which is the most dangerous form of speech regulation. That's more dangerous than saying, no, you can't say that. You must say this. is more dangerous, then you can't say that.
It's almost like the people that are arguing these positions don't know that that's what Russia and China force their media and comment their whatever to do, and it's like, oh, do you know what the words that are coming out of your mouth?
Right, exactly. It's the trope that's spreading around is, oh, this is what communist countries do, this is what fascist countries do, they prevent you from speaking. No, they require you to carry a government forced message. That's what China does. It requires people to repeat the Communist Party line. Repeating the party line is exactly what these people are arguing for. They're saying that they're requiring private companies to repeat these party lines. Trump is president. It's so dangerous. There's people on both sides of the aisle that realize how dangerous it is, and hopefully this will be quashed and we can move past this really dangerous moment in American history.
I really hope so. I love history. I feel like I'm a student of history, and you're looking at yourself for the time, one of them too. So we'll wrap this up quickly. But I do feel like we are at a crossroads like the U.S. was in the 1930s, and it's how do we fare at this crossroads? And we don't know which way that's going to go really until history continues to play out.
So I think you're right, and that's a really interesting time because it was as we were coming out of the first Red Scare, which is when a lot of the free speech cases were really starting to come about.
Interesting. So hopefully we'll keep that in mind. As always, this has been very entertaining. I don't know why I say as always because it's the first time that I've had you on, but it feels like
We've had enough cognac. It feels like we've been going at this for days.
Right. I want to do this more. So clearly you're now a new legal expert that comes on and gives us legal commentary. But more so than that, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Any open standing invitation.
I'll definitely be back, especially when you have the cognac.
I'll make sure that I have another bottle then. Alrighty.